All right, welcome in. Happy Saturday. Tough times for the Golden State Warriors, but we're here. It is just Dubs, JD, John Dickinson. We got Kyle Harr, we got Raf Corral, and we are with you here on the Sports Leader for the next couple of hours as we talk all things Dubs basketball. We get you closer to Cactus League action for the Giants this afternoon, as well as Kerry Crowley's got you covered beginning at noon for that. And also, just passing along here a bit of news for those of you that might be just waking up and kind of getting acclimated to big football week as well. The 49ers restructuring Nick Bosa's contract earlier this morning as well, clearing up some more cap space that can be used, spreading out the payments to Nick Bosa. Of course, we'll be all over that throughout the course of the week coming up here on the Sports Leader. But it is going to be Dubs basketball for the next couple of hours here. The phone number to jump in and join the conversation, 808-KNBR, 415-808-5627, as we do each and every Saturday here on the Sports Leader. And the dam is breaking, I think, is probably a good way to start here for the Golden State Warriors, as much as it's not anything that fans want to really have to come to grips with in terms of being the reality. But Kyle, good morning to you, my friend. And the Warriors had kind of kept this thing going for a while, I think longer than many would have been expecting them to without Steph, if he was going to be out this long. And nobody really knew that Steph was going to be out as long as he has been now, 6 weeks, and still probably a couple of more in addition to not having Jimmy Butler. But the last week and the last 4 games since we did this show on Saturday morning before the Oklahoma City game, this season has taken a turn in terms of the not necessarily competitive spirit, but the results. The Warriors had been picking off games here and there to stay afloat, probably being the best way to talk about it, and stay in the conversation for, can they be 8th and maybe in the play-in and sneak to 7 and get a favorable matchup, and Steph comes back. And now, Kyle, 4 in a row to OKC. Utah and Chicago, woof, on those two, drops the Dubs back to under 500, and then a little bit of everything last night that we've seen here over the last 6 weeks. They get dominated for the first half against the Timberwolves, ugly second quarter, fight back as the Warriors have in a bunch of games where it has been kind of ugly, but just enough for Anthony Edwards to go for 40 and put them away down the stretch as the Warriors lose 127 to 117. So it's 4 in a row. It's 2 under 500. And now the Warriors are headed, Kyle, on the road for what's going to be an incredibly difficult 6-game roadie, while Steph Curry and his return is still somewhere out there on the horizon between, let's say, March 25th and the early part of April.
Yeah, the light at the end of the tunnel. There may be some, but it's very dim. And yeah, they go 0-4 this week, but the 2 that really hurt were the games against the Bulls, at home against the Bulls, and in Utah, because I mean those were 2 tanking teams, and it felt like, in the fourth quarter, you look at when they played Utah, the Jazz took out Keontae George to finish the game. And, you have my man Blake Hinson give the Jazz the go-ahead 3 to put them up in that game. And then you play the Bulls. And the Bulls coughed up so many turnovers in the fourth quarter that really helped the Warriors go on that big run and take that 8-point lead, only for them to choke it away.
Yeah, not good against Chicago. And I think that was, we talked about a tipping point a week ago maybe with the Clippers loss after the Warriors had played so well in the first half, and the Clippers just threw it on them in the second half. But then they go and they beat Houston unexpectedly, the competitive loss to OKC. But yeah, the 2 that have really flipped this thing in the wrong direction were the Utah and Chicago games. And then even last night, you've got the Warriors dropping like flies, already not having Steph, already not having Jimmy. Draymond Green goes down during the warm-up. with the lower back injury. Let's call it what it is. That's been something that's popped up here and there on nights where maybe it's a national game, but you want to give Draymond a little bit of rest, but you have to document some kind of an injury. It was an Amazon Prime game last night, but Draymond goes out with the low back. Al Horford goes out in game after the Warriors decide they're going to start Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford together, and then Horford goes out early. Seth Curry, who's only played in a handful of games, ends up with an adductor/groin, so he goes out. And then you even lose Quentin Post on top of that due to an ankle sprain. And so the Warriors already having a bad week, it gets even more difficult with the injuries that they continue to be dealing with. You've got the Steph return again out on the horizon. And now you've got a much tougher week and a half ahead before the schedule lets up a little bit. But as we've seen here in games against Utah and Chicago, I mean, there really is there's no schedule let up as this team goes to New York. They do have the one game against Washington, but it's Boston and Detroit. So the Warriors are playing the three best teams in the Eastern Conference right now, according to the standings coming up on this trip. They're playing the third seed currently in New York. Then they do have the one game against Washington. It's the first of two games against the Wizards, the much maligned Wizards, in the next 2 weeks, as they will also make an appearance at Chase Center coming up when the Warriors return home on the 27th. The Dubs get Brooklyn and Washington back-to-back games on the 25th and 27th. But then it's Boston, number 2 in the East, Detroit, number 1 in the East. No team hotter than the Atlanta Hawks right now, who have won 8 in a row. Jonathan Kuminga, a big part of that in 3 of those 8 games. But as we talked about last night, they're winning with Kuminga. They're winning without Kuminga. They're winning when Kuminga plays great. They're winning even the other night against Brooklyn when Kuminga, for the first time, didn't play well. But they're beating everybody right now to the tune of 8 consecutive games. So that game's not going to be a picnic for the Warriors. And, of course, Kuminga, if he plays, is going to have something to prove, to show up and show out against the Warriors team that he never felt he got a fair shake against. And then the road trip wraps up against Dallas. So all that to say, Kyle, happy birthday, Steph Curry, because that was the other headline. Happy 38 to Wardell Stephen Curry today here, March 14 of 1988. And here we are now in 2026. So Steph turning 38 as the Warriors' existential crisis here moves toward a likely, I think now, 9 or 10. But I think we can say with the schedule ahead and Steph probably not coming back until after the Warriors are back home at some point, it's becoming clearer and clearer that the Warriors are headed for the 10 seed in the play-in tournament and a likely date against Portland, where they're going to have to win up in the Pacific Northwest to get a shot at the Clippers or the Suns in the second play-in game to pull off a playoff series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, which, of course, the defending champions and a team that would be a very, very difficult matchup. So the path. And, we all have those birthdays, Kyle. I don't know. You're probably too young to have had a true crisis point birthday. But I got to wonder, as Steph celebrates last night and the team heads to New York and he has the ability to celebrate today, number 38, kind of an ominous tone here with the 1 year left on the contract of the Warriors heading toward the play-in bracket.
Yeah, no better way to celebrate your birthday than I think someone put in the chat than playing with Malevi Leones here in the future. But I mean, poor Steph. I mean, yeah, what can you say? There's not a lot of talent right now around him, and I don't think there is a lot of motivation for him to come back quickly, because I mean I feel like we're going down the path of the inevitable in terms of, well, we're just going to be eliminated, if not by the Portland Trail Blazers, then by the Suns, and if not by the Suns or the Clippers, then by the Thunder.
It still is trending for a Steph return. I know we played the clip, and maybe we'll revisit that at some point here between now and noon of Anthony Slater giving the latest as far as just where things sit with Steph and the runner's knee and of course the reevaluation, which was just a lead up to another reevaluation a week from today, going back to what was released on Wednesday. But Steph's starting to do on-court work, which will have the ability to intensify. And again, he is making good progress, which he was not making good progress. If you remember, they left that out. I'm not saying he wasn't, but they left that part out of the prior reevaluation, whenever that was back, I think on March the 1st, before the most recent one. And so I do think they are being cautious. I think the one thing with the runner's knee, as much as I think Steph wants to return, there was the Draymond text that he let everybody in on that Steph had sent about the fact that he is coming back and hold it together and all of that. What, going back to the Houston game, I think, which feels like it was about 3 months ago. But I know there is still this debate as to should Steph return. And I think with every loss, it becomes, more of a debate, right? The whispers start to get a little bit louder as to, well, should Steph even come back? He wants to come back, number one, which I do think is real. I do think there's a benefit in having him get an opportunity to play with Kristaps Porzingis, and that is maybe the lone bright spot from this past week. Even though the Warriors took an 0-4 since we last did this show, Kristaps Porzingis able to play in 3 of the 4 games for the Warriors, going back to OKC, and then for the first time being able to play in consecutive games against Chicago, and then the game last night after they sent him and Al Horford home against Utah. Small positives at this point, but Kristaps looked pretty good last night. Looked like he continues to shake off some rust and get himself back into having some semblance of physical conditioning that can get him out on the court. Obviously not in back-to-backs. We know there's going to be certain games he has to miss, but we were putting that number around, can he get to 10, can he get to 12 here, about a week ago, and he's jumped from 1 to 4 over the last week, and he started to look, I think, better within each game. And that was something that was somewhat disastrous as far as where things sat in terms of just the way the trade was starting to look, because you had Kuminga, yes, who's been injured himself and only played in 4 total games with the Hawks, but he came out like gangbusters in the 3 games that he played, averaging 21. And like I said, the Hawks are beating everybody. And not so much the Warriors' accountability for a trade that would look bad, but just the fact that they felt they were getting a player that they could work into their system for this season and want to bring back for next season as well. So I think, seeing what it could look like to bring it back to Steph with Porzingis, even if it is only a handful of games, I do think there's a benefit to that. And as we discussed last night, the Warriors sit here at 32-34 with 16 games to go. They could go 0-16, and they could go 0-16, and for them to not make the 10 seed still in the play-in tournament, you'd have to have Memphis at this point win. What did we say? They had to go 10-6 in the final 16 games to be able to pass the Warriors, and they are actively tanking. So they aren't going to win half that at this point, Kyle.
Or the DeJounte Murray-led Pelicans can go 11-3.
That's right. You brought up the Pelicans.
Scenario B.
You brought up the Pelicans, who are not tanking because they don't have their draft pick and playing much better basketball. I think 6-4 in the last 10. Could they go 11-3 toward the? And I think the answer to that is no. So again, there's nothing in terms of benefit of saying, hey, we're going to shut it down if we're the Warriors. To me, you might as well take your shot. And I think where the Warriors have been careful with Steph, and I do want to use Steph and the birthday conversation and him officially turning 38 today as kind of a jumping off point to get into the bigger picture questions as to what do they do not only to close out the final month of this season, but just as we continue to learn more about the way this team has had to operate in the interim here with all of the injuries. How does that change the calculus as to what you believe they need to do in this offseason? Because it is startling to we all talk about Steph getting older, and then you look at the calendar and it's like, my God, where did the last 5 years go? Where did the last 10 years go? As he hits birthday number 38 here today. But you look at the Warriors currently and where they sit right now, the Warriors would be 12th in terms of where their pick would be. I'm looking at the standings currently, and I'm trying to see, did they? I haven't. Kyle, forgive me. I haven't. Yeah, Portland is still 10 in terms of the seeding in the Western Conference. Warriors are 9. There's a half game separating the two. Warriors are 32 and 34. Portland's 32 and 35. Not that we need to do a deep dive breakdown. Obviously, Portland has the tiebreaker, so Portland would move up in any event of a tie because they beat the Warriors 3 out of 4. So in all likelihood, the Warriors are going to finish 10th in the West, which means final play-in spot. But looking at everybody's favorite website, or at least a third of the NBA, if not half of the NBA's favorite website, are you familiar with Tankathon? Tankathon, Kyle. You big Tankathon guy? Tankathon.com.
When it becomes necessary, yeah.
Well, it's grown to become a little more necessary. So Tankathon made its way to a tab here on Just Dubs.
Is it like a lottery draft simulator?
Yes. It lays out very clearly and accurately the percentage of getting a top 4 pick based on where a team sits, what pick your slot would be, and then percentage to get the number 1 overall pick. And so right now, the Warriors are sitting 12th in terms of lottery slot. So if their ping pong balls don't hit, then they would be, they draw the top 4, right? When you do the lottery, for those, the Warriors haven't been in it a ton here, but they draw numbers for the top 4 teams based on their odds. And then everybody after the top 4 gets ranked in terms of worst record to best record among all the other teams. So it's not as if they draw for all, 14 spots in the lottery. They just draw for the top 4, and then everybody else gets slotted. So if right now the Warriors slot is 12th in terms of would have the 12th pick in the 2026 draft, I think realistically it's probably going to wind up 11 in terms of their slot, because they are, I think, going to finish behind Portland in the standings, but that means they finish ahead of Portland in the draft lottery standing. So in all likelihood, the Warriors are going to end up 11, and that would give them a 9.4% chance of getting a top 4 pick and a 2% chance of landing the number 1 overall pick. Again, that's finishing 10th in terms of seeding in the Western Conference versus 9. And it also is contingent on not winning both of your play-in games to get into the first round against Oklahoma City, which would be extremely unlikely. You do that, then all of a sudden you're picking, 15th at that point, as opposed to where you are, would be slotted, which would be in that 11 or 12. But I think projecting it out, probably most likely 11. But so you're talking about the difference between 11 and 15. I think realistically, as far as, make the playoffs, don't make the playoffs. But here's the other thing, Kyle. It's going to be a long shot as to whether the Warriors can even win those 2 games, even with Steph, although certainly you'd never count them out. But the whispers are getting a little bit louder as to, should the Warriors just say, you know what, Steph, we'll see you in October. We're going to hang on to this 11 spot and take the chances that maybe they could move up in the lottery.
So you're telling me there's a chance. Yeah, I'll take it. Give me some 9.4% odds. Yeah, I'm looking at it right here, JD. Yeah, this is great. This is great. Yeah, they have a whole lot of goodies in here. I kind of like it.
Yeah,
But
well, yeah, you can do it. You can simulate, the lottery. Like you can basically click a button, and I mean, again, this website's been around forever, but you can simulate it. You want me to do a simulation for you, Kyle? You want me to just do a sim and see what it comes up? All right, here we go. All right, I'm going to do a sim. All right, based on where things sit right now. All right, here we go. First one out of the gate. Milwaukee wins the lottery. Wow. And they were the team just in front of the Warriors at 13.9 and a 3% chance. They were the team that had the 10th best odds. We project the Warriors to have 11. Milwaukee moves up. Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Sacramento, Indiana. 1, 2, 3, 4 in the sim. Again, I promise we're not going to get carried away, but it is a fun exercise as the losses start to mount. And believe me, the discussion as to what the Warriors do and should they just bring Steph back, it is going to get louder, although Raph, thanks, Raph joining the chat. Pop that mic open, Raph.
Yeah,
the sim is
I
rigged.
I had a mic.
The sim is rigged for Milwaukee to help Giannis. Wouldn't that be something? You're going to help Giannis after you help Dallas when they lose Luka. You got to keep Giannis in Milwaukee by giving them the pick. I believe it. I believe that pick goes to Atlanta, though, if I'm not mistaken, because I think Atlanta gets the top pick between the three. I'm looking at Milwaukee to Atlanta. Yeah, in that instance, Milwaukee's pick would go to Atlanta, and like the Pelicans pick would go to Milwaukee. And anyway, it's somewhat convoluted as it relates to the Clippers pick going to Oklahoma City and all that. So Atlanta would win the lottery, by the way. So Atlanta would win the lottery because of Milwaukee in that instance. So they wouldn't get the help on that, as if things needed to be going any better for Atlanta. They've already won 8 in a row from 25 and from 27 and 31 or wherever they are now to 35 and 31. So 808 KMBR 415-808-5627. Kyle, did you have a quick thought here? We'll go ahead and take our first time out. We'll come back. We'll get into the YouTube chat as well, but also the discussion about on Steph Curry's 38th birthday. Should he come back? The benefits of him coming back versus not coming back, and the existential question that is out there, because the load management minutes restriction thing is just it's just been stuck in my head all week as it relates to just how this Warriors roster is built. We saw it come into play last night as the Warriors were making their run down the stretch, and I think it relates to how the Warriors have to look to build this roster in the offseason as well. So I do want to get into that. Kyle, quick thought to you, and then we'll come back and we'll get to some chats.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty interesting, though, if the Warriors do fall and better their odds by a hair and that pick falls within the top 4. I think that would create a civil war between the fan base on whether you should draft a really good player. There's some unbelievable players in the draft, but to draft a really good player or to use that pick to trade for a really good player, I think.
Well, that's a good place.
I think would be.
Yeah. I can't believe, and I've had that thought as well. I think that's a good place to continue the conversation coming up, because I have a very clear designation in terms of, Steph come back or not. Lottery odds 11 versus 12 versus 15, as it would be somewhere between 11 and 15, and the percentages that relate to that, because I do think you could make the case that the percentage of the Warriors' ability to get a top 4 pick or get even the number 1 overall pick at 2 to 3%, depending upon where they fall, is that greater or worse than the percentage chance that you would give them to beat Oklahoma City in a first round playoff series? And what would the benefits be to that? Although, again, I do think you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, as it relates to trying to get, Steph back and getting young players some playoff experience. And you're right, you hit it. The debate that would wage on should the Warriors wind up in the lottery again as to what do they do with that pick, depending upon where it lands. So we'll get into that coming up. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. The Golden State Lumber and Showroom text line is open as well. The best YouTube chat in sports. We'll get to some Kyle's clicks on the other side. Is just Dubs. We're getting it going here on a Saturday on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the Sports Leader.
next season has become the season in this final Steph era, and I don't think at all they want to jeopardize that. And this is, from what I gather, an injury that they fear if you do put him back on the court and he's not quite ready, it could re-injure it, re-aggravate.
This is KNBR, and this is Just Dubs with John Dickinson, streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
Next season is the season for Steph Curry at the end of his contract. 38 will be 39. But again, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Happy birthday to Stephen Curry as he turns 38 today, March the 14th. We're back here, Just Dubs, with JD, John Dickinson, Kyle Haar, Raf Corral, all sitting in here as we get you closer to noon. And we'll get you to Giants baseball coming up at noon, as well as first pitch in the 1 o'clock hour with the time change. Kerry Crowley's going to have pregame for you coming up at noon here on the Sports Leader. So keep you updated on all of that and everything going on. But yes, the year, and I think two things at play there, Kyle, as we get back into the conversation. 808 KNBR 415-808-5627. We'll get into the YouTube chat here in just a second. Two things at play. I think one is the understanding that the Warriors are being extremely cautious with this runner's knee injury with Steph, in part because I think their fate in terms of the regular season has already 95% been decided, and how many games Steph can come back for at the end may determine 9 versus 10. But the reality is it's headed here if he's not going to play at all on this road trip. And it sounds like he's not only not going to play on this road trip, but I would probably bet against him being in action in those first 2 games back when the Warriors get home on the 25th. It feels like this is trending toward April 1st. I know I said a week ago I thought March 25th, and now I'm setting the number at a week later. I don't think he plays on the trip. I don't think he plays in the 2 games back against Brooklyn and Washington on the 25th and 27th. I don't think he'd play in Denver regardless. I don't think you'd send him out to Denver. And so then you have a couple of more days off, and then you start the true home stretch there with 7 games to close out April, beginning on the 1st. So maybe you bring him back on the 1st or the 2nd. It is a back-to-back with both games at home and a tough one. They're playing San Antonio and Cleveland back-to-back. Then they play Houston and Sacramento and the Lakers before they go to Sacramento and the Clippers to close out the season. So I could see Steph playing, say, 5 of those final 7. And maybe it gets you to 9, maybe it doesn't, but it gets him into enough of a rhythm and everybody else back into a rhythm with him to where you take your chances at what the plan can provide. But the first part there, Kyle, is Slater saying, and I think he's pretty clearly saying, hey, the Warriors are being cautious here because if Steph comes back too soon and he starts to get sore again at the level at which he was before, it's not that there's going to be any future major damage or anything to that knee where there was nothing structurally on the MRI or anything, but he's going to get shut down if that happened. Like any re-aggravation or the pain that was there toward the end of January that's kept him out here the last 6 weeks, any of that pops up and it's night for Steph Curry's season. So you don't want to have that happen. So in essence, you're giving him extra time to make sure that he can be fully healthy and not have it pop up at any point in the final couple of weeks of the season or in play in game A or play in game B to try to get to the postseason.
And I would be careful in which games he does play because in that stretch from April 1st on, there's a couple games against some tough teams, and I do not need to see him. They play Houston. I don't need to see him play against the Rockets and have Amen Thompson shadow him for 30 minutes. But I also think, and JD, you said to play in 5 of the last 7. I think that's a big enough sample size and hopefully Porzingis can play in those 5 games as well. I think that's a big enough sample size to see what you have in Porzingis with Steph Curry, because I mean, on paper, it should be a good fit because Porzingis is a big player that can stretch the floor, space the floor, shoot the three, and then a pick and roll with Porzingis and Steph. That sounds pretty lethal. But I mean, let's say it doesn't look as good as it seems, and maybe you have to go in a different direction with Porzingis.
The other flip side to the coin and question is, and I think a lot of people are asking it as they hear us discuss this return plan for Steph. And you know what I think a lot of people are saying to themselves and probably screaming, and maybe it's even in the YouTube chat, what's the point? What's the point, JD? What's the point, Kyle Haar? And again, I think as we look at the standings in terms of, every loss, I think that the Warriors take, as much as I do think Steph wants to come back, and I do think Steph, I think he's planning on coming back. Every loss does in some way, I think, lessen the likelihood or makes the amount of games potentially fewer that Steph would come back and be able to play, because I do think with every loss, they get a little bit closer to maybe believing that the best course of action is 100% ensuring that they have the best potential lottery odds. And look, this is not a conversation that I would have expected us necessarily to be having a week ago, let alone 6 weeks ago, although actually 6 weeks ago, I might have been more inclined to believe that we would be having the conversation if you told me Steph was going to be out as long as he's been out, because I don't think anybody thought Steph was going to be out as long as he has been. But to your point, the game at which he last played on January 30th against Detroit, he was getting, it was just like watching him move in that game. And being in the building at Chase Center to watch him move in that game, I remember I said it to Austin Scott in the digital department, who was sitting right there next to me. This is just not tenable. Like, this is just not going to work because of, like, it's just, he is not going to be able to make it to the end of the season in any kind of meaningful way. And then wouldn't you know, he ends up going out in that game and he hasn't played since. So the question becomes, again, as a lot of people are probably screaming, well, what's the point in terms of bringing him back? I think, to me, bringing him back, there is a benefit in bringing him back because you get to see him play with Porzingis, because you get to see the rest of this group potentially play with him and Porzingis a little bit. I think the risk reward, though, it's not as if this is something that can turn into a, year-long, devastating Jimmy Butler, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant type of an injury. Now, you obviously don't want to have some other kind of freakish or fluke injury pop up to where there's a sense that I think the Warriors are trying to navigate internally that is, hey, let's just make sure that nothing catastrophic happens between now and the end of the year that screws up next year any farther that it's already screwed up, because, it is going to be, and let's play the clip again here, Raph, the one that we just played coming in, because I think this leads to the other part of the discussion as far as next year. Let's roll this Anthony Slater one more time of ESPN from yesterday, because it's just this first part.
Next season has become the season in this final Steph era. And I don't think at all they want to jeopardize that. And this is, from what I gather, an injury that, they fear if you do put him back on the court and he's not quite ready, it could, re-injure, re-aggravate.
So there you go. Next season is becoming the season in this final Steph era. And again, as he turns 38 today, and it's a cross between, the appreciation of everything that Steph has done for this Warriors franchise and for the league. And then how's it going to end? And is it going to end in a respectable manner with him having the ability to compete at the highest level possible? It was interesting to hear, Slater kind of characterize it as that. And look, I think rightfully so, given the fact that Steph's in the last year of his deal, Draymond's in the last year of his deal, Jimmy's the last year of his deal and coming off the injury. But there's also this, as we were kind of talking about, you can't have something completely screw up next year before you even get to next year, because the Warriors have, and we're going to start to lay it out here after we get into some chats, but they have this incredibly difficult path that they have to attempt to navigate with so many different questions as to how they get better, because I just don't think, Kyle, that it can be as simple as wait for Jimmy to come back in February and keep Porzingis and try to convince Al Horford to come back for another year. And we're going to hear from Sam Amick in an interview that we aired earlier this week. I was filling in for Greg Papa with Papa and Greg Silver, and we had Amick on, and we got into the conversation about Horford, and he made it sound like Al really had to be convinced last year to play this year, and that retirement would definitely be an option. And look, Al's probably been their best player the last 6 weeks, along with Anthony Melton. So there's a lot that the Warriors are going to have to navigate here down the stretch. But it is, we're all doing the calculation between wanting to see Steph play meaningful basketball, acknowledging the fact that Steph, as of today, is now 38, and the Warriors have, I think, a lot of work to do in the offseason. And the one thing I would say that would be a mistake, Kyle, would be, and I truly haven't gotten a full sense of this from people that I've talked to, but there can't just be this, hey, we had a really good team in the 11 months Jimmy was on the team before he got hurt, and Jimmy's going to come back off an ACL, and we're going to wait for him, and we're going to make a run the final 2 months of next year like they made a run the final 2 months of last year. Like that can't be the plan with Steph now 38. It just can't be.
No, definitely. Like the worst thing in my mind is you run it back with the same group. You bring Porzingis back on a cheaper deal, but then that money that Porzingis is making this year, a lot of that would go to Melton. Like, I think that everything needs to be on the table, whether it's trading Jimmy Butler, trading Draymond Green, not re-signing Porzingis, and maybe it just becomes a salary dump. I mean, even Melton, like, as much as I want to bring him back, you have to look at everything. Al Horford, because, like, in my mind, they just can't run it back with the same group, especially with all the injuries and the minutes restrictions that we've seen from a lot of these guys this season. Like, that's not going to help you get any better. And then you add on Jimmy Butler coming off an ACL injury next season. And you're already at the midpoint next season, and now you have to massage Jimmy Butler back into the rotation too.
And they already have the all-time load management and minute restriction team. They already have the all-time. They already have that squad with Jimmy and coming back, and Steph where he's at, and Draymond missing games here and there. Melton and Horford and Porzingis are going to be a part of that deal as well, if you can get Horford to come back. But it's interesting in hearing Slater say what he did about last year kind of being the year now, because it's the final year of the contract, and with the birthday today for Steph, it just, to me, it hit home the aggressive nature that the Warriors are going to have here. And we were talking about the draft pick before the first break that we took, and I want to give you my answer to that, and then we'll get to some chats here to close out the first hour. As far as I'm concerned, and look, we've talked about it. It could be 12, it could be 11. It could have the 3% chance to move up to 1, or the 9 to 10% chance to move into the top 4. If the Warriors land a top 3, 4 pick, I would say top 3 for sure. I'd keep the player, depending upon who's it going to be between Peterson and DeBonsa and maybe Boozer, right? If it's in the top 3, I think you keep, you project to have 3 franchise altering type players in that top 3. If it sticks at 11 or 12, I know this is a deep draft, but I'm sorry, I'm not trusting the Warriors at 11 or 12 to be able to draft a player that's going to come in. And sure, they could draft a playable player. They could draft a player that's capable of being in the rotation, but you need greater than a player that's just going to be in your rotation for next year, especially if you're hell-bent on waiting for Jimmy and keeping Draymond, because I do think those are the two things that are going to have to be factored in here to this offseason. So if you move up, and again, the Warriors' chance to move up would be 9.4 if they wind up 11 in the 11 slot. Basically 9.4 if they wind up in the play-in tournament as the 10 seed and lose. 7.1 if they wind up as the 9 seed and lose. But the battle between Portland and the battle between Golden State there. And then again, you're talking about a 2%, a 1.5 to 2% chance to move up there. If you win in the lottery to get into the top 3 or 4, then I think there's a conversation to be had about keeping the pick. And I would lean toward keep the pick. If you're anywhere between 11 and 14, 15, to me, I think you have to look to be able to move that pick. And we'll continue that conversation coming up here as well. All right, let's get some chats before we take our final timeout here to close out the first hour of Just Dubs. And we'll be with you here until noon on the Sports Leader before we give way to Kerry Crowley and Giants baseball. Sorry, Kyle, I jumped the gun on you there. Sorry, I was trying to go in order.
No, you're good.
But I'm gonna
start with jokes on you.
Yeah, let's start with jokes on you, and then we'll keep marking them. Sorry, Kyle, I took the rain. I was feeling frisky. Over the last month or so, I've gained access to the ability to put comments on the screen, and I didn't really think with my ADD that I'd be able to do it in the YouTube chat relatively effectively. But then I find myself kind of multitasking, and I'm marking them, and it's much to
it's kind of fun.
Much to the dismay.
It's kind of fun.
It is kind of fun. Much to the dismay of Kyle's clicks, as I'm cutting your grass, Kyle. I'm cutting your grass, brother. A little bit here, but no, jokes on you. JD, can Curry and Dre sign an Ohtani type deal, backload any contract? That way their salary will be high when the Warriors rely on rookies. Short answer to that question is no. They cannot. And there aren't, there aren't deferrals, and there aren't void, to use the MLB example, there are no deferrals. And the NFL example, there are no fake years or void years. You can't bonus money like the 49ers did this morning in flipping a bunch of Nick Bosa's guaranteed money into bonus, and then making the salary smaller and stretching the salary out over years of a contract that basically will never be attained, because the player will either be gone or you renegotiate the contract to redo the fake years basically, and kick the can down the road in terms of your cap penalty. I mean, good luck. I mean, you could take a 8-year college course on NFL capology. Well, actually, the NBA's made it pretty convoluted as well. But short answer, no, in terms of that. Although, as you look at, Draymond and Steph's potential to be on the Warriors beyond 2027, I think both of those guys would be taking less money than the 27 that Draymond could opt in on for next year, and I think is probably inclined to. And then the Steph money, which is going to be right around, is it 62 for Steph next year? I'm gonna bring up the Warriors' salaries here again real quick. 62.5 for Steph next year. If Steph's on the Warriors in 27-28, it's going to be less than that, which would obviously free up some ability to spend in other areas. Draymond at 27.6. Obviously, his number would go down if he's on the Warriors. I'm of the belief that they should convince Draymond to opt out and re-sign him to a smaller deal, but it doesn't sound like the Warriors are inclined to do that. It sounds like they want to keep him on that 27, believing that he's going to opt in on it, and look to maybe move. To me, if he opts in on 27, I think the Warriors should look to move Draymond Green at that point. And I think they have to look to move Jimmy in the offseason, as much as they've been reluctant to want to do that as well. But we'll get into more of that coming up in the 11 o'clock hour. All right, let's we'll keep it going here. Clem Ackers, I was looking at the standings, and the Hornets have a better record than the Dubs. The dynasty is cooked. Yeah, the Hornets have played great basketball during this stretch in which the Warriors have lost Jimmy and then subsequently lost Steph. Yeah, that was not a surprise, because I know the Hornets have been super hot. But yeah, I was looking at the tankathon, and the fact that, right now Charlotte at 34-33 is ahead of the Warriors, and probably is going to finish ahead of the Warriors. Philadelphia is the 14th team. Their pick goes to Oklahoma City, but they're at 35-31. They'd be 14th at this point. At one point, I was kind of thinking, oh yeah, the Warriors are, if they're going to be 13-14 basically, if they wind up in the play-in tournament, but failing to qualify for the playoffs. The truth is that they really cannot get beyond 11. I don't think. Again, it kind of comes down to them in Portland. I do think the Warriors are going to finish with a worse record than Charlotte and Philadelphia. I do think the Warriors are going to finish with a worse record than Portland, which means that they would have a higher. They would flip-flop in terms of draft position. Again, should you not win your play-in games, you would flip-flop in terms of draft position. And so the Bulls, though, are the next closest team, I believe. I guess it was Milwaukee, technically, was the next closest team. But I think when you look at it, there's a 5-game separation between where things sit in terms of where the Warriors could get to, I think, realistically. And so I think they're pretty much capped at being able to be the 11th lottery slot. And again, all they have to do there is finish behind Portland in the standings, and that gives you the 9.4% chance to move up, and that gives you the 2% chance at getting the number one overall pick, which, by the way, is a greater percentage chance than Dallas had a year ago as a team that was the 10 seed. But yeah, the paralyzing reality is coming to fruition here, that the Warriors are in major trouble. Major trouble for this season, which everybody already knew. But to me, it's more about the existential conversation about, as we continue to look at the guys who are getting more run, where do they fit on next year's roster? And can the Warriors really afford to just wait for Jimmy Butler to come back in February? That's the thing, as Steph sits here on his 38th birthday, and Draymond's probably going to opt in, that I think is just a complete, like, you cannot sit back, lay back, make your 12th pick, roll with the punches, kind of run it. Like, you can't run it back. As much as everybody knows what time it is, you can't be so comfortable that you just look to run it back and only be willing to give up draft capital for somebody like Giannis, which is probably going to be a pipe dream anyway. All right, let's get 2 more, and then we'll take a time out here. That's the thing, JD, no cap. Appreciate you. If they move Jimmy and Draymond instead of letting them just walk, then Joe has to trade his precious picks, which he isn't going to do. He should just let those 2 walk. So let them walk after 2027. Well, then you're going to have a year like next year like this year, which I think is like, that's the issue that I have, is keeping Draymond and waiting for Jimmy means you're basically going to be the Steph version of this team that we've seen, only with Steph. And is that team going to be good enough to be in position where Jimmy comes back and then they can be top 6 next year after Jimmy comes back and make a run? And the answer for me would be no, because Steph's going to miss games. And then when Steph missed games, what do you turn into? You turn into this team that we were praising for being 5-8 or whatever it was a week ago. That's now like 5-12. And I mean, it's a horrible team. And again, you give the try-hard guys credit, but that's a horrible team. That's a team that over 82 games would be on like a 24-win pace. And I think that's an overachievement at the 24-win pace. So I just don't think you have to look to trade the picks. You have to look to move Draymond, and you have to look to see what you can get for Jimmy. And I know they want to be respectful to both Jimmy and Draymond, given everything Draymond's brought. And for me, it's not so much Draymond is washed or anything like that, although I know people are frustrated with it and believe that to a greater extent than even maybe I do. To me, it's more, how do you get better? And the only way you're going to get better is to use your larger salaries to include in trades and be willing to include those draft picks in terms of trades to reshape the roster while making the determination and the evaluation of the young players and the role players that you want to keep. All right, one more here, and we take our second time out, first to close the hour. Betcha Kerr wants to wait on his decision to return until he finds out who the Dubs get in the draft. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. Good luck with that. I think that decision is going to have to be made before then. I mean, the season at this point, let's say the Warriors play in the play-in game against Portland. That's on April 15th. So that's a month from tomorrow. April 15th will be that 9-10 game between the Warriors and Portland. Let's say you lose that. The lottery is on Mother's Day, I believe, May the 10th. Happy Mother's Day. The lottery on Mother's Day coming up here. And so it's a month removed basically from when your season would be over, that you would find out what pick you're going to get officially. Although, again, the Warriors most likely to be slotted into 11 or 12 unless they somehow get, Atlanta or Dallas level lucky of the most recent years. And by the way, Draymond Green already listed as out for Sunday, apparently, per the NBA injury report. I didn't realize that injury report was out already, although I guess on the East Coast, it's got to be out by 5, and we're coming up on 2, I guess, on the East Coast for tomorrow. But yeah, I think it's going to be difficult for Kerr. They're going to have the direction conversation with Steve before they know what pick they're going to get and kind of go through the scenarios. And I think all of those things will have to be acknowledged and accepted, in addition to paying Steve a ton of money to come back for the final Steph era run year, or whatever the hell Anthony Slater of ESPN categorized it as. All right, let's take a timeout. 808 KMBR 415-808-5627. We'll come back. We'll do some more clicks, and then we'll set things up for the interview that we had with Sam Amick earlier in the week when I was in on Papa and Silver. It's Just Dubs on a Saturday. We're with you for another hour here. 808 KNBR, best YouTube chat in sports. We roll on here on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the Sports Leader. Live from downtown.
Hurry, way downtown. Bang!
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson on the Sports Leader, streaming live at knbr.com and on the KNBR app.
All right, rolling along here, hour number 2. Just Dubs, JD, Kyle Haar, Raf Corral. We'll get to the phone lines in just a second. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. Stephen Curry, 38 years old today. Will he return for the Warriors? Should he even return for Golden State as they now sit 2 games under the 500 mark with 16 games to go? Dubs basically locked into the 9-10 matchup in the play-in race. And an injury report, Kyle, that you're not going to want to miss, that will also make you maybe want to call in sick tomorrow for Dubs OT and our show that we're going to have at around 7:30 after the big nationally televised Sunday night basketball on NBC telecast tomorrow as the Warriors take to Madison Square Garden. So that injury report, which is a big woof, I will say, coming up momentarily. We already mentioned Draymond Green as part of that, listed as out. All right, let's get to the phone lines. Rob in Lafayette gets us going here in hour number 2 on Just Dubs on the Sports Leader. What's going on, Rob?
Hey, how are you? I love the show, man. Thank you. Had 2 quick questions. Number 1, how many players realistically could really affect the team for the draft this year? How many really good guys are there? And number 2,
I think it's 3. I think it's 3. But yeah, go ahead. I'll elaborate, but go ahead. I'll let you continue.
Oh, just 2 or 3, huh? And the other question I had is there a way of moving up in the draft like in the NFL draft?
Oh yeah, you can trade your pick and a future pick, or your pick and a player to be able to move up. And look, I think there's 3. There are more than 3, Rob. I want to be clear. This is a very deep draft, and many draft experts believe that there are as many as 15 or 16 really good players that could come in and make an impact. I think that the number, though, in terms of the consensus as far as guys that can make a major impact immediately, like come in and be star or close to star capable right off the bat, is probably closer to 3 to 5. But I don't want to shortchange the fact that this is one of the deepest drafts, at least on paper, in recent memory in terms of just overall quality players, that probably run pretty well through the first half, or even close to the top 20 picks overall.
Thank you so much for telling me.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for calling in. Don't make it your last call. I know you won't. 808 KNBR, Rob's line open for you. I mean, really, we're talking about Kyle, and I didn't think we were going to do this on March 14th, but I didn't think I was going to go to Tankathon on a week ago today. I didn't think I was going to be looking at mock drafts on March 14th as well. But we're really talking about, in terms of like immediate potential star impact, we're talking about Darren Peterson from Kansas. We're talking about AJ Diabonsa of BYU, and we're talking about Cam Boozer of Duke. Like those are the 3. Caleb Wilson's pretty good from North Carolina, although I think he's a cut below that. The point guard from Houston is also somebody that I think there's a lot of really good projected players, but I think we're really talking about 3 or 4, maybe 5 that can come in and oh my God, like this guy is truly capable of changing a team in the first year or 2.
Well, now that Cal has moved to the ACC, I'm seeing a lot more quality.
A lot of Duke in North Carolina.
Yeah, a lot of Duke in North Carolina, and look, I've seen on Twitter when people do the Tankathon and they have the Warriors get a top 3 pick and all right, Cam Boozer, get ready to learn Warriors, buddy. But but there's so many good players, and even outside of those three, there's been so many freshmen this year that have dropped like 40 points, which is just absurd.
Do we need to do our second tankathon lottery sim of the morning here? We did one in the 10 o'clock hour. Do we need to do another lottery sim for the
maybe
folks out there?
The 11 o'clock hour is our friend here.
Yeah, we'll see. And we did one earlier. Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Sacramento, Indiana, the top four. Milwaukee would have to give their pick in that scenario to Atlanta, but Milwaukee was the team closest to the Warriors in terms of the overall percentage as things currently sit. All right, let's do one more, and then I'll give you that injury report that's going to make Kyle. It's going to make Kyle want load management tomorrow for Dubs OT as the Warriors play at Madison Square Garden. All right, here we go. Can we get a Raph? I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but do we have some kind of like a drum roll or something we can
let me find it.
We can get for the for the lottery sim. All right, let me but while we wait for the drum roll, let me look at the injury report for tomorrow, and this is ugly. This is ugly and early as the Warriors hit the plane to New York and to the East Coast. Obviously, Steph's out, Jimmy's out. We know that. Draymond Green out. We talked about this. Left lower back injury management. Draymond's out. Seth Curry's out. Left adductor strain. I think we knew, given where things ended up yesterday, that was going to be the case. Al Horford's out. Calf strain. Moses Moody continues to be out. Right wrist sprain. Kristaps Porzingis out. Basically rest. General illness management. So they're gonna play Porzingis, or the plan is going to play Porzingis in Washington. So Warriors are going all in on this Washington game. DeAnthony Melton, Kyle, left knee injury management out. So Steph,
Oh my God,
Jimmy, Draymond, Al, Melton, Moody, Porzingis, and Seth Curry all out for the Warriors tomorrow against the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. So the Warriors are going all in on the Wizards game. Rusty Nail with one of the great chats here. I'm a Raiders fan. I live at Tankathon. So yeah, Warriors not even. I know Raider fans and Kings fans. I think, and there are that is quite a combo at different points. 25 shots from pods in the Garden. That's right. Hey, injuries can be a blessing in disguise. We learned that last night. Oh my goodness. Another Pajemski stepped in it. All right, let's let's get our drum roll. We're going to do our second draft lottery sim here of just Dubs here on this Saturday. All right, drum roll please. All right, and it is Indiana. Indiana wins the draft lottery. Indiana, the Pacers, get the number 1 pick, currently sitting with the worst record in the NBA. The Warriors fail to move up. They end up with the 12th pick as they currently sit. Again, they are ahead of Portland in the standings, which means they're behind Portland in the lottery. So the Warriors end up 12. In this scenario, nothing interesting. Warriors end up 12. Indiana, Brooklyn, Chicago moves up. And again, Chicago is one of those teams that with Milwaukee was right there next to the Warriors. Chicago gets number 3. Sacramento ends up with number 4. Washington, number 5. But Kyle, it's interesting because the more you do these sims, and we've seen it in recent years with Atlanta and Dallas, teams in that 8 to 10, 11-ish range have actually moved up a lot over the last 7 or 8 years. Not necessarily always to number 1, but again, they draw for the top 4. So there's opportunities to get into the top 4 even if you're not number 1.
Right. It always feels like there's one kind of surprise team that shouldn't be in the top four that jumps all the way into the top four. And
Yes.
and I mean the Pistons, for example, when they were tanking, it felt like they had the worst record for like 5 years straight. And where did they end up? They ended up they did get Cade Cunningham, but then they ended up with like the number 5 pick, like for like 3 straight years, it felt like.
Yeah, so that's where things ended up there, and so yeah, we've done 2 of these sims to this point, and we've had one where Milwaukee moved up, would have to give their pick to Atlanta, and one where Chicago moved up into the top 4. And again, recent history doesn't mean anything in terms of the odds for this year, but those numbers have tended to hit more in the last 6 or 7 years, really since they revamped the lottery odds. The teams in the middle or toward the back end have been more prone to moving up. But that could be something that obviously over time, the longer you keep doing it, would level off toward the mean, where there isn't a lot of movement in terms of those teams in most years. All right, let's continue in the YouTube chat. Here we'll get some Kyle's clicks. We'll take a timeout, and then we'll rerun that interview from Sam Amick from earlier on Papa and Silver before we close out the show. Rusty Nail, I think the point that JD brought up last night about the salary construction of the roster is alarming too. Yeah, we were talking about how, I mean, you look at, if you just do the math right now, it's basically, I mean, you've got Steph 59 right now. We did this. You've got Jimmy 54. You've got Porzingis at 30, although that number is going to go down. You've got Draymond at 25, but that's going to become 27. And then if you want to add Moses Moody in, you've got Moody at 11. That's $180 million for 5 players currently on the top 5 Warriors salaries add up to $179 million, $180 million. Everybody else is like $24 million. So, but if the Warriors have done a nice job, I think, of finding those cheaper, more cost-effective type players to add to the roster. The problem is that the Warriors still, I think, either need a better number 2 option than injured Jimmy coming back in February, or they need a better number 3 option than hoping Porzingis and Melton and Horford can all come back and play. Like I love this Warriors team for next year. If it's Steph, if you're waiting for Jimmy, you have another guy who's maybe not as good as Jimmy, but better than Moody and Podziemski and Porzingis and Horford and Melton. And then you kick Melton down and you keep Porzingis, and you go and you beg Horford to come back for another year and opt in. If you're telling me we did this exercise earlier with the Warriors and how, or we did this exercise with the 49ers, right? The wide receiver room. You got blank spot, Pearsall. Now you got Mike Evans, blank spot, Pearsall. I look at the Warriors and I go, Steph, don't want to count too much on Jimmy if you choose to keep him. Blank spot, right? Blank third best player that maybe could act like your second best player until Jimmy comes back, if you're going to choose to look to hang on to Jimmy. And then you start to get into Melton and Porzingis and make those guys your fourth best player, Melton, your 5th best player, Porzingis, your 6th best player is Horford. And then it's Pods. And then it's Moody. Right? Now we're talking, now you're cooking if you got, you're 7 deep on the roster, and you're to that point where you're kicking Moody and Podziemski, and Gee is 8. Those kind. Now you're cooking. If you're talking about that and the way the Warriors have been able to fill the back end of the roster, but the only way you can do that is if you're willing to move draft capital, or you hit on a pick that can come in and be that guy who walks onto your team and he's better than Melton, Porzingis, Horford, Podziemski, and Moody. Doesn't have to necessarily be better than Jimmy or Steph, but can help keep you afloat during this time where you're waiting for Jimmy Butler to come back for what probably is going to be close to the first 4 months of the season. All right, let's keep it rolling. Kevin, they should just shut down Steph for the season. I don't think they're going to do that, but again, it might be semantics at this point as far as, are we talking about no games or are we talking about five or six games at this point? But again, the debate is if you shut him down, you're basically accepting the 11th best odds to move up in the lottery. And obviously, that he's going to be healthy at that point for next season. But the whispers are growing louder, I will say, Kyle. And I've been not necessarily dismissive, but probably more combative toward the notion of just shut him down. With every loss that the Warriors have here, and they're going to take some L's on this road trip. I think at least 4, if not 5, if not, dare I say all of them, although it sounds like they're gearing up by punting on the game tomorrow to really try to make sure they can get the Washington game, which, of course, you do that, you better get it before you go to Boston and Detroit. Otherwise, this thing has the chance to get real ugly. But, this team 2 under, 3 under, 2 under, 5. This team's trending toward being 4 or 5 under when they come back from that road trip and then still potentially not having Steph. So it's looking more and more like this is going to be a 38-39 win team, probably in the best case scenario, as opposed to a team that I think, a couple of weeks ago, you're thinking, can they get to 42, 43? But again, you start getting into 37, 38, 39. And then I do think that the whispers get louder as it relates to, as much as Steph is trying to come back, you get into the whole, what's the point of this thing type of scenario. All right, let's roll through a few more here. Speaking of injuries, how bad are Horford, Post, and Seth's injuries? I think Seth's going to be out a while. I'm going to wait to hear from Steve Kerr tomorrow at MSG before the game. But Seth really seemed uncomfortable with the groin/adductor. And obviously, as an older player, those can take a couple of weeks at a minimum. Post, we'll see. I'm not sure. It looked like a decent ankle, but he's questionable, by the way. So he's probably ahead of all of them. I didn't mention Quentin Post in the long list of the injury report for tomorrow and all the guys that are going to be out for the Warriors. But yeah, Post is the only one questionable, in addition to Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, Al, Melton, Moody, Porzingis, and Seth all out. Porzingis questionable with a left ankle sprain, so it couldn't be too bad of an ankle sprain there for Quentin Post. Thanks, Erwin, for checking in. Let's do 2 more, and then we'll take a timeout. Why does it matter if they drop all these games? It really doesn't. It really doesn't at this point. Like I said, they could probably lose all their games and still wind up with the 10 seed and decide to have Steph come back for the final week of the year if he's healthy and ramp up. Because again, the reality is they are going to end up playing Portland in Portland. And then they're going to wind up, if they win that game, playing Phoenix or the Clippers in Inglewood or down in the desert. And there's nothing really, and they're going to be 12th or they're going to be probably 11th if they don't move up in the lottery, should they not win both of their play-in games. So it's, to me, that's the path. It's probably going to be 11th pick if you don't move up and you are the 10 seed and you lose, or if you do somehow miraculously win a couple of those games to get into the playoffs, then you're looking at probably the 15th pick as well. The Warriors are making a signing, by the way. The Warriors are signing. Are you ready? Omer Yurtseven. Omer Yurtseven, who's been with the Heat and the Jazz, a 10-day contract. 10-day contract for him, a big man to come in and play. That does not bode well for the Al injury, potentially. we'll see that you need another big to come in and be able to play, even with Porzingis. But obviously with Draymond out, with Porzingis out, with Horford potentially out, maybe a little bit longer term, Omer Yurtseven joins Malavi Leones and LJ Cryer on this Warrior squad.
Nate Williams.
And Nate, we're approaching. It's funny. We're approaching. There's been a lot going around this week of like kind of the COVID, like remember 2020, because this year is, or like the calendar for this year is the same, right? Like there was like Wednesday, March 11th and Friday the 13th was right when basically before everything shut down in 2020. There's the calendars kind of mirror each other for 2020 and the remainder of 2026. There was a lot of like revisiting of like the time in which we all went into lockdown, basically around this time 6 years ago. And let me tell you, that injury report and the Omer Yurtseven signing, very 2020 when the Warriors got shut down on March 11th at 15-50 and wound up being one of the 8 teams that didn't months later eventually get invited to the bubble. But the truth is it kind of doesn't matter, which is why we're figuring out a world to talk about different things here on Just Dubs and Dubs OT. And one more, and then we'll take our time out. We'll hear from Sam Amick. I think it's a naive outlook to assume a trade will help put this team in title contention. I think there's a far greater chance of the picks helping this roster moving forward. Again, I'm top 3-4, and for me, it's not so much title contention. It's a fact that if you believe you're getting a star caliber player, then you pick that player, you keep that player. But that player has to be able to be impactful for next year. And for me, it's not so much title contention, but it's more the meaningful basketball conversation about, can you be good enough to get into the top 6, and can you be good enough to win a round or win multiple rounds in the playoffs, at least one round in the playoff, get back to that second round like they did last year, or like they did going back to the year where they knocked out Sacramento. So I think it is, they have to look to be creative in my mind. I mean, that's really what I think it shake, how it shakes out. All right, let's continue on here. Let's take a timeout. We'll come back and we'll keep it rolling in the chat a little bit. We'll decide what we're going to do with the Sam Amick interview from earlier, because we are pushing forward toward the finish line here on this Saturday. Just Dubs, JD, Kyle Haar, Raf Corral. We're getting you closer to Giants baseball, but talking some Warriors right here on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the Sports Leader. Dub Nation, this is the real and inside story on Warriors basketball. Just Dubs with John Dickinson now continues. Streaming live at twitch.tv/thesportsleader.
All right, rolling toward the finish line here, not only on Just Dubs for today, but on this Warriors season with 16 games to go, 6-game road trip beginning tomorrow. 808 KMBR, 415-808-5627. Giants baseball coming up for you. Kerry Crowley's got pregame at noon. Giants going at it, Cactus League action in the 1 o'clock hour. But we do this each and every Saturday when we can here, talking some Dubs basketball. We'll be back tomorrow following the Warriors and the Knicks. A lot of guys going to be out for Golden State. And then as Stephen Curry celebrates his 38th birthday today, where do the Warriors go from here in terms of trying to plot out a roster for next year? Golden State, and we'll just reiterate it for those just joining us, no Steph tomorrow, obviously. Jimmy's been out. No Draymond, no Horford, no Melton, no Porzingis, no Moses Moody. In addition to, well, that might have been everybody. Did I leave somebody out? The list is so long, I forgot if I Seth.
I
left
that's
Seth
everyone. Oh, yes. Seth.
I left Seth out.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
But with the adductor strain.
We signed the Omer Yurtseven.
Yeah, Omer Yurtseven. He spent time with Miami, I think, in Utah. And that does not bode well for Horford, who was listed on the injury report with a strain. And so if that's a calf strain, that might mean we're not going to see Big Al for a couple of weeks, which is unfortunate, given the fact that he's been one of the Warriors' best players. So let's continue on here in the chat as we head toward the finish line here on this Saturday. What do we got here, Kyle? More Kyle's clicks. Florida Dubs fan chiming in here. Don't know who said it, but agree that just seeing Steph and KP play together does not tell you much without Jimmy and the rest of the roster set to some extent, especially if only for a few games. Yeah, I disagree with that. I do think there's a benefit. I think Jimmy can play with anybody. I think you could almost make the case that Porzingis and I think you could almost make the case that Steph and Porzingis can play together, just given their skill sets. But to me, it would be as much for the other players on the roster, the Moody's, the Pajemskis. Like I'd like to see what does it look like, and even in a small sample size, I'd like to see what does it look like with, say, Steph, Pajemski, Moody, maybe Draymond and Porzingis. Like, how does that lineup look together? Maybe you factor Melton out of it because we know Melton can play with that group, and we know Melton's somebody that basically can play with anybody and everybody. But to me, it's more about looking at Moody and looking at Pods, who are two guys that we know played very well with Jimmy and really improved their game having Jimmy join the roster. So to me, it's more about that. It's more about those two. So I'd like to see a Steph, Pods, Moody, Draymond, Porzingis trial and error lineup down the stretch to see, does that even in a 5 to 7 game sample size allow for those guys to look comfortable? Because if you can do that, and then at some point you're factoring in Jimmy, who works with the other two, I wouldn't be concerned with Jimmy's ability to fit in with Porzingis. So I do think there's a benefit, but maybe not a great one. Fozzie checking in on the 925. If next year is the year, what does that mean for the LeBron to the Warriors hopefuls like me? I think it would be more likely. I think the Warriors are going to lean in on LeBron and trying to convince him to come. I think Draymond's going to try to convince him to come. I think Steph could potentially try to convince him to come. I think the Warriors ownership group is going to try to convince him to come to the best of their ability. I think, and I think that's the greater point, Fozzie, is that the Warriors are going to have to, they're going to have to think outside the box a little bit. And not that LeBron's super outside the box, but they're going to have to think bigger than just make your pick at 11 or 12 and wait for Jimmy and keep Porzingis and keep Melton. And like, you can't be that locked in on the hopium of everything falling into place for next year to where you just, we're going to make the simple move and just keep it. No, you have to look to be more aggressive. And I think LeBron is a means by which the Warriors can attempt to be aggressive without Kyle having to give up anything. Cause I think he would just sign because he'd want to play with Steph.
Yeah, no doubt. And I also think it can't just be one of either, you kind of stay put, nothing happens, you make your pick at 11 or 12, or the other option, you can't think we're going to hold out in the hopes of Giannis, and if we don't get the pipe dream of Giannis again and strike out again, then we're going to fall back and then do nothing or do something on the margins that's not a needle mover. Like, that can't happen.
No, you just can't plan to be a 500 team if everything works out while you wait for Jimmy. Because you know what that's going to lead to? That's going to lead to everything's not going to work out and you're going to be right where you are now or worse. Or it's going to lead you to everything works out and you're the 7 or the 8 seed, which is what you basically were at the point in which Jimmy Butler and then Stephen Curry subsequently got hurt. And you're going to be, you can't just set yourself up to say, we're going to be in the play-in when Jimmy comes back, and then maybe we can get hot down like that. That's not, to use Fosse's term, that's not next year is, quote, the year as far as the final one on his deal. And I think the Warriors understand that. I do. Like, I think the Warriors do want to be able to shortcut this thing back to, at a minimum, where it was last year when they were healthy down the stretch, or a couple of years ago when they knocked out Sacramento. I do believe they want to do that. The question, though, is, are they willing to be aggressive enough to look to make it happen? And again, that would mean potentially giving up not all their future picks, but some of their future picks to help bring somebody in that can help stabilize the roster. All right, good one from Fozzie. No Cap chiming in. I think it's foolish bringing Porzingis back unless it's a vet minimum or $5 million per year. Anything above that makes no sense. Re-signing Melton is meh, in my opinion. Man, I would be looking to. I think Melton. I think Melton is almost, you have to bring him back, but you have to bring him back. And I always say this, like, you have to be careful as to not let the way this team looks right now, as bad as it is, as ugly as it is, as depleted as they are, as much as, and I've said it a ton, the current team that the Warriors are putting out there right now, I do think would win in the teens. Like, the team that the Warriors have played with for the last 6 weeks would be right there with Indiana and Sacramento and Washington as far as battling for that number one overall pick. As much as all of that is true and it's frustrating, I do think the one thing that everybody on a nightly basis, we can acknowledge how bad it is, but you also have to take a deep breath. And I think, Melton, as he's been asked to do more, in his own way, has looked a little more meh, but that doesn't mean that you wouldn't. I mean, he's been a perfect culture fit. He's a perfect basketball fit. They've been able to keep him healthy. To me, Melton is somebody that you have to, he's enjoyed his time here with the Warriors to the point where he'd want to continue. So I think Melton, you got to bring back. I'm with you on Porzingis. I don't think he's done anything to this point to where, even though he had 20 last night, he's beyond a minimum level player at this point. But I do think there's an in-between ground around that 5 million mark to where you could possibly bring him back in the 5 to 10 range, where it wouldn't necessarily prevent you from being able to do other things. All right, one more here. We'll take our final timeout, and then we'll come back and wrap things up in the chat. Joe Schmo, Steph, Butler, LeBron, Dre, Kristaps, starting 5. Not terrible. Not terrible. Could do worse. I don't know that would be the starting 5. I think Draymond's probably coming off the bench there. You'd probably go with a Moses Moody in that scenario. But I think it would set up a lesser role for Draymond in a more meaningful way. All right, let's take that time out. We'll come back and we'll wrap things up with our final installment of Kyle's Clicks. Love the comments. Love the interaction. Appreciate everybody. Best YouTube chat in sports, the Just Dubs OT YouTube chat. And we'll roll on here and get to the finish line and hand it off to Kerry Crowley, who's got you covered as far as Giants pregame as the Giants go in Cactus League action coming up in the 1 o'clock hour. Just Dubs with JD right here on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the Sports Leader. Dubs with John Dickinson keeps rolling. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
All right, final couple of minutes here. Just Dubs, Kyle Harr, Raf Corral. Appreciate everybody as the Warriors have dropped 4 in a row. Stephen Curry's return still somewhere out there on the horizon, and the Warriors releasing an injury report that is, incredible. That of a tanking team, honestly, for the game in New York. But a lot of these obviously legitimate injuries for Golden State. Let's wrap it up here. I was looking back, Kyle, during the break at the lottery odds from last year and where things sit. And I'm looking back. It looks like Dallas was in that 11 spot when it was all said and done last year, which we've talked about that being the spot that gives the Warriors they could be in should they wind up, let's say, losing out to Portland as far as being the 10 versus the 9, and then losing in Portland and being on their way. But again, the odds of that happening 2 years in a row, I'm not so sure about that. But again, doing the research, maybe that is the spot you want, Kyle.
Lucky number 11. Well, I mean, then you go back to the Hawks getting the number 1 pick. I mean, that was a bad draft. And then the Pelicans, when they got Zion, they had like a 0.8% chance to get the number 1, something along the lines of that, I believe. So yeah. It's not impossible. And if you're looking for some hopium, there is that.
Yeah, the last couple of games, in particular the Chicago game and the Utah game, now with all of the other additional injuries beyond Steph and Jimmy, and you start getting into Draymond and Al and Porzingis and Melton and Moody's been out and all that, and it's I'm starting to come around a little bit on the. I still would bring Steph back. I'm not saying that. I think Steph wants to come back, but let's be honest here. I think this thing is heading toward a direction where you could bring Steph back, have him play a handful of games, go through the play-in, and you're probably going to wind up in the same spot anyway. And so you might as well see if you can, catch a little bit of lightning in the bottle and give yourself a fight as far as something to hope for next year. Because I think there is an underrated component of, like, if Steph did come back for 5 games and they did play well and were relatively healthy and did win a couple of play-in games, like, I think there would be a motivation to push toward, all right, let's kind of keep this thing together, but look to add to it for next year as you factor in what you do with Jimmy and what you do with Draymond. Like, it would be, I don't think you just want to go out with a whimper and have it look, because as we've said, look, I think the Warriors had been up until the last week, almost you could make the optimistic case. Well, they fought and they've been competitive, and so you felt good about it. But immediately when you start to lose every game, and I think we were headed down this path eventually, then you start to look at everybody else on the roster nightly, and you start to think they're worse players than they actually are. And so I think that, going back to the prior segment, is the deep breath that everybody has to take. And I think that's where winning a few games here and there, not that it changes anything to where you think you're better than you are, but I think when you lose every game, you start to think that you're a lot worse than you are as well. Again, dramatic changes are going to be needed, but thinking that everybody on this roster stinks is also not necessarily the best course of action, as much as the collective isn't great. All right, let's do about 2 minutes. We'll go rapid fire here and then wrap things up. Rusty Nail Spurs getting Duncan. I'll never forget that one. They were legitimately bad, though, that year. I think the Celtics had the best odds that year to get number 1. Orlando getting Shaq back in the day.
Yeah.
And then getting the number 1 pick again. Because if you remember, they and this, I say this, I mean, this was, I think, before Kyle was around, but they got Shaq. They went from like a 20-win team to a 41-win team. They were the last team to not make the playoffs in Shaq's rookie year. So they had one, and that was back in the day where the teams that didn't make it, you got one ping pong ball in the hopper if you were that team. And it went from, I think there were 11 teams that didn't make it. So it went from one, the first team out got one, the second team out got two, the third team out got three, the four, all the way up. And the one ping pong ball that said Magic hit, and they ended up with Chris Webber, who they traded for Penny Hardaway. The Warriors that year had the third pick, and they did the trade with the infamous and dramatic announcement from David Stern. Go back and look that one up for all the young heads. The dramatic announcement on draft night of the Warriors Magic trade that sent Penny and the picks that were going to be going as well in the Chris Webber trade. All right, let's do two more, and then we'll call it a day. San Jose Jazz fan. The Warriors can't draft, can't trade, can pay a little. Shout out Fred Astaire. Thanks, San Jose. And we'll continue with our final one. Dubs, the all load management team. Almost all geezers next year. Can't have that be the case. Got to balance it out. Kyle, appreciate you, my man. Final thought to you real quick. We'll go around the horn, and then we'll call it an afternoon and give it to Carrie.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to look forward to something, and
keep showing up.
We brought you that the 9% chance that the Warriors can land a top 4 pick, but oh man, it was dark days this week, but probably some more dark days ahead.
Yes. Raph, thank you, my friend. You want a quick final thought to you? Note to self?
Sure. Note to self. No. We don't need any more geezers. What are we, the 49ers?
Oh, my goodness. That Colin Cowherd comp, he made that comp a little bit. The Niners remind him of the Warriors. All right, for Kyle and Raph, and I saw Kyle Chung skulking around there a little bit earlier in the Daily City studio.
I told him we'll mention him at some point.
Yeah, after the Warriors take on the Knicks right around 7:30. We always do. Kerry Crowley's coming up next in the Giants baseball right here on the Sports Leader.